Okay, we're back. Now, I happen to have a beer connoisseur with me, and we're going to take a little journey actually through the beer aisle. And you know what's really cool? We're both holding beers. I got the recorder in the right hand and the beer in the left hand. Bruce is going to give us a little bit of tour through sort of all that we see, because you know what? To most of us, these are all just kind of like cool labels and things like that. And it's really hard because there's not a lot of opportunities to just go out there and really taste, especially, you know, not everybody carries everything and things like that. So tell us what we're looking at. Oh, do you guys want to get through?
No.
Okay, all right. So tell us what's cool. And tell us what's really interesting. Like, I know a little about the Trappist. I mean, I've seen that.
Well, that's obviously actually a great place to start. And it's interesting that your eye fell right to the Trappist beer, because we're staring at a wall of about 200, 300 different beers here, and probably the most well-known of the products is going to be the Trappist ales. Trappist ales are very unique because they're only brewed at this point by 7 authentic Trappist breweries in the world.
In the world, wow.
In the world. 6 of them are located in Belgium, and one of them is located in Holland. And the ones we're looking at here are probably the absolute king of the Trappist beers, if not some of the best beers produced on planet Earth. So,
well, that's a statement. Wow.
And
so I know how to pick them.
Without question. Amazing that's the first place your eye spotted. So the Trappist Rochefort, and you can see they brew 3 different styles. And they are so unique, they don't call them fancy names or have all sorts of catchphrases. They just basically go by the degrees Plato, or the gravity of the beers, and hence you see the 6, 8, and 10 numerals identifying the different beers. They don't have any other name except the number representing the degrees.
So wait, what's the difference, say, between a 6 and a 10?
So the difference essentially is in the mix of the ingredients, and obviously in the alcohol content and strength of the beer. Belgian beers, right off the bat, it's important to know, are much higher alcohol than your traditional domestic beers. Although a lot of the American brewers in recent years, trying to kind of catch some of the fire of the Belgian craze, have started to brew much higher alcohol Belgian-style products to try and capture some of that marketplace. But you can see right on the front, they're labeled, and the 3 different beers we're looking at. The 6, which is the lowest number and hence also the lightest of the 3, 7.5% alcohol.
Okay.
That's 2 to 3 times most domestics that we brew in this country. The 8, 9.2%, and then if you're really in for a good time and it's a nice warm winter night, you've got the 10, which is 11.3%.
Oh wow, that's a substantial beer. Yeah.
So we're almost this beer. We're almost really in a wine category in terms of strength. And to the right of the Trappist Rocheforts are the Westmals, or the Westmaal as they call them sometimes in Europe pronounced, but really probably one of the most well-known of the Belgian ales. They only brew 2 styles. One is called double, and then the other is triple.
So that's double and triple?
Double and triple.
Okay.
And the double is a darker beer, hence the brown label, and the triple is a lighter, more champagne-y triple, meaning triple fermented. So high alcohol and actually very light in color. Amazing beers.
See, what's amazing is I think that people would really love to know this information, but I guess this is going to be one of the few places where they kind of get that. So that's kind of cool.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what else are we looking at? What's kind of interesting?
Let's see, as we move through, I would say let's move to the right, because he's got a nice assortment of some beers from California, from the West Coast, from the Sierra Nevada mountains, called Sierra Nevada Ale.
And I've had that, yes.
Very, very well-known domestic beer. Also probably in the domestic market, probably one of the best produced products in the United States, in my opinion.
Best produced in what sense? In terms of, style, manufacturing, distribution?
So, nice thing about Sierra, at least in my mind, is it's also one of the real American original microbrews. So, Sierra Nevada and one of its neighboring breweries up in San Francisco called Anchor Steam.
I've had Anchor Steam because I lived in San Francisco for 6 months working on litigation out there.
And another very, very famous, or really considered like the original American microbrews. They even came before Sam Adams, which we're obviously tasting here today. But Sierra is just known for its incredible quality, great assortment of styles, different seasonal beers, great packaging, amazing mix of hops, and they also actually, we're looking here, you don't see this all the time, in fact, very rarely, Sierra's top-of-the-line product called their Bigfoot Barley Wine Style Ale, also very high in alcohol and very, very nicely produced product. Here he's got the 2011 Bigfoot. You don't see this too often.
Now, do they call it Bigfoot because you get to see it as much as people see Bigfoot?
I think the Bigfoot is probably more a reference to its incredible, its grandeur in terms of its big beer taste. It's a serious beer.
Wow. Oh, okay, but...
So in here we see he's got the Sierra, the whole lineup of the stout, the porter, an IPA, which obviously is a very heavily hopped beer, I think similar to some of the Sam products you were talking about before. He's got a Hefeweizen, which is a German-style Hefeweizen beer, which is unfiltered wheat beer, very nice, a little bit of a sweetness to it, sometimes a hint of bananas and cloves, and then the Bigfoot. And actually, funny enough, the only one we don't see here is the regular Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, which is their base product.
Now, what is the difference between a porter and a stout?
So basically, the difference in the products, they're all made with similar ingredients, and as far as the hops and yeast and malt and barley and obviously water. But when you alter the relative amounts of those
percentages,
ingredients, will allow you. So porter and stout, both dark beers, both heavier beers. Oddly enough, most people think stouts, because they're very dark, are very strong. Stouts very often actually are quite lower in alcohol, but very higher malt content, higher barley, sometimes a mix of those, and that's what they derive the really deep, rich, dark color and flavor from. So they're really similar products on a spectrum, but there's some different brewing techniques, and I'm actually not a brewer, more of just a drinker. So,
okay. Well, look, you certainly know more than the average guy. So what else? Now, what's interesting is I believe these are New Orleans beers, because when I was in New Orleans, I remember drinking both Dixie beer and Black and Voodoo. I remember that.
Absolutely, and I actually haven't had Black and Voodoo in a while, but it's a lager beer, and not many beers coming out of New Orleans that I'm aware of except Black and Voodoo. So,
and maybe
also
Jack's. Something like that?
Jack's, I don't know.
Yeah.
But nice product, just nice label, kind of catches some of the New Orleans mystique in the bottle, which I think is a big sell point for them. What else do we have here? Here's obviously a lineup of all of the Sam products. So if we go up one shelf, though, we're going back into Belgium, and actually this entire lineup from here to the right is, again, some of the finest Belgian beers that are available, going right to the Delirium Tremens, which, for those of you with any medical background, is actually a medical condition, which actually refers to an illness that can be induced by excessive alcohol consumption. So it's a bit of a play on words, or almost a bit of an irony that they chose that. And for those of you who know more about it, that's a condition that can be associated with hallucinations and delusions, and sometimes patients will describe seeing things like pink elephants and animals talking to them, and the label, as you can see here, very creatively depicts a lot of that most prominent.
Oh yeah, there's a big old giant pink elephant on that one. Yeah.
So very unique product, kind of in this porcelain, almost ceramic appearing bottle with the 25 ounce with the champagne cork and the wire cage top, which you'll see in a lot of the nice Belgian beers packaged that way, which is really to preserve the freshness and the carbonation, because they're such lively beers. The nice thing about the Deliriums, and then just to the right of it, you see the three different Chimay, which is the Chimay White, the Chimay Red, which is their staple ale, it's their red ale, and then the grandfather of the Chimay line is the Chimay Blue, or the Grand Reserve, which is a dark beer. But all of these beers undergo a final fermentation in the bottle, which basically is why they're higher in alcohol, and that's also why when you open them up, they tend to have a very explosive...
Which probably means that people need to make sure that when you open these bottles, you point them away from you and other people.
Absolutely. I would treat these like champagne, essentially. And what they do with these beers is they ferment them, their standard 2 times, and then these are also bottle fermented. So what they'll do is they'll actually put a coating of live, fresh yeast on the bottom of the empty bottle, and then they will fill it with the beer and then cap it, and then that allows the beer to undergo an additional fermentation in the bottle.
Wow, that's an interesting concept.
Which essentially allows it to kick up the alcohol, and that's why these beers are so lively. When you open them up and pour them, you just see the incredible bubbles, the smoke coming out of the top when they pop, and that's because of the bottle fermentation process.
Why is it that Germany and Belgium seem to have such big beer traditions? What is it about either the land or the climate or something?
Historically, I don't know as much the history, other than obviously the oldest breweries in the world are in both Belgium and Germany. Actually, we'll find, I think, a couple rows down, the actual oldest brewery in the world, or at least so they claim on the bottle, is the Weihenstephaner Brewery, which is a Belgian Hefeweizen. We'll find it in a minute, and I think it's from about 1650. But I think partially it's because of just the strong brewing tradition and the fact that they were growing a lot of probably hops there, whether that was because of climate reasons. But, that was where all of the brewing traditions really started and obviously has been maintained.
So why did the monks get into the act?
I've asked a lot of people that question when I've been traveling in Belgium, and some people, brewing has always been a part of monk tradition, of those monastery traditions. People even say, and I'm no religious historian, but that even back in Mesopotamia and the times of Jesus, they were brewing different malt type, almost beer-like products. Now, some people said that the monks were also doing it as a means of actually sustaining the operation financially, because they were brewing and actually also selling the product locally, which sounds like an odd product to choose if you're in the monk business. But
it's recession-proof.
But
you got to pick a winner.
They've been around for a long time, so it seems to have been successful. But there's no question that most of the breweries in Korsendonk is actually not a Trappist, but also a monk brewery. It's called an Abbey Ale. Meaning not Trappist, but made in a monastery, and to this day, if you look at the pictures of the brewery, there's guys in brown robes, not talking to each other, walking around and brewing beers. I
don't know if you remember, but do you remember the Odd Couple episode where Felix and Oscar went to the monastery and they couldn't talk and they had like little blackboards on their chests? It was kind of funny, but
possibly before my time, but it sounds very entertaining.
Okay, so now we skipped over the lambic beers. I've had those. It's funny. When the very first time I had it, I think I had the raspberry, it's actually a very interesting and different kind of beer drinking experience.
Absolutely. So lambic beers, and certainly we didn't skip them due to lack of interest. Basically, very unique product because they're actually brewed with fresh fruit, and I've actually been in the Lindemans brewery in Belgium when they were actually harvesting and brewing their framboise, which is the raspberry, and it's an amazing process. Literally, their other famous product is actually right here, which is called the Kriek, which is a sour Belgian cherry. And I was in the brewery when they essentially harvested the fruit, and they basically harvest, a truckload of fresh raspberries, and then they put them through crushers, essentially, almost as if they were pressing them as they would make press grapes for wine, crushing all of the raspberries and harvesting all of the juice, essentially straining out all of the seeds, and then they basically have a base beer that is a regular beer that they then add in the fruit into and then ferment with the fruit, and then it gives it the amazing flavor. These are really best, in my opinion, as dessert beers. So these are great beers after like a nice meal. You can basically open up one of these and have it with like raspberry sorbet or ice cream or things like that. And actually, a nice thing is actually that women like them very much because they're a little bit sweeter, not as tart, and not as carbonated. So
not as beery.
Not as beery. Exactly. Well put.
So I carry them in my bar in the city.
Oh, okay.
We carry the framboise.
Do they use them for dessert? And anyone ever order them as like an after dinner?
I would.
You're on the radio, but
I would lean towards the women definitely enjoy them in my bar.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, it's a nice thing because if most women, they say, I don't drink beer and I'm a big beer drinker, but this is a nice common ground where you can find where women will also enjoy it. But great products.
And doctors say eat fruit, so there you go.
No doubt. I'm not sure if that's what they had in mind, but
So what else? You're listening to 88.1 FM, Richard Solomon, taking care of business, TCBRadio.com on the web, and WCWP.org on the internet. And we're talking about beer.
So moving here, certainly no conversation about beer would be complete without looking at some of the German offerings, because they really are the original breweries in the world, as we alluded to before. So here's a nice lineup of essentially Weiss beers. Weiss beers, as most people probably are aware of, are wheat beer, predominantly wheat brewed beers, and that's what gives them a lighter, kind of sweeter flavor. They're very popular in the summer. You'll see them in the bars. Those are the beers that most people will be drinking in the very tall glass, often served with a rim of fruit, such as a lemon, which is how they do it in Germany. And they also come in light and dark. They come in Hefeweizen, which is the white beer, and then they come in Dunkelweizen, which are dunkel or a dark Weiss beer. And we're looking here at a couple of the classic examples, being the Franziskaner, very, very classic beer. Nice picture of the gentleman, monk-looking gentleman with the big mug. And then Schneider Weiss.
I see he's tasting the product.
Sampling the beer, yeah. And the Schneider Weiss, and then, of course, Paulaner, which is very well known, because of their Oktoberfest offerings in Munich. So those are some of the German beers that we see.
And I guess we have some English.
So, again, running the whole gamut, you see the Sam Smiths. And again, this is just an incredible selection that Jeff has in the store here. He really, no stone unturned. And Sam Smith's is really the most famous probably of all of the English beers. So they come from England, very classic, very elegant label. They also do a lineup starting with an India Pale Ale. And I'm not sure if you guys touched them before.
No,
what makes an India Pale Ale?
I have no idea.
Its name from?
I don't know.
So India
probably.
India Pale Ale originates its name from the fact that at that point in time, and my history is a little fuzzy, but basically British were engaged in essentially military operations in India, and they wanted to send their troops beer by boat, but there was a concern because they weren't using preservatives at the time, and they didn't want the beer to turn while it was taking the trip over to the troops in India. So what they would do is they would increase the hop content of the beer. We've talked a lot about hops today. And by increasing the hop content, they basically change the environment of the beer to make it less favorable or habitable by bacteria.
Oh, wow.
And that's hence the bittering. And if you ever drink an India Pale Ale, you'll know that they are very bitter, heavily hopped beers. Not for the faint beer drinker. They're for people who really enjoy not really the beer flavor, but the hop character of a beer. And hence the name India Pale Ale. So Sam Smith, one of the originals. And then they also make a nut brown ale, very famous.
I've had the nut brown ale. Yeah, it's not bad.
Oatmeal stout, and then their winter welcome, which is their winter seasonal. Very good products.
And of course, we have other things here. Let's see. There's Blue Moon. That's
so Blue Moon, which I won't lie, way back in the day, before I really got turned on to some of the other products we were talking about. At one point in my life, thought Blue Moon was an unbelievable specialty beer, and even was convinced at one point that it came from Belgium, as I think the producers would like you to believe. But the reality is that Blue Moon is a beer that is made in the United States, and it's made in Colorado, and it's actually owned by Coors.
Wow.
So Coors was looking for also an entryway into the capitalizing on kind of the Belgian beer craze, and hence they created Blue Moon, Belgian white, but if you look below it says Belgian style. So
yeah.
it is a domestic product.
It's like when they say sort of like chocolate flavor as opposed to chocolate, right?
So,
yeah.
But you know what, Blue Moon, I will give them credit. It's an easy drinking, consistent, nice beer, and it's actually a good transition beer for someone. If I'm looking to try and get someone into the Belgians, or having some people over who I know are more of like I won't say some of the lighter American products, but
I know what you mean.
It's a good
things you get in stadiums.
Correct. It's a good beer to actually get people into some of the other beers. It's a good transition beer. So not a bad product, but make no mistake, not made in Belgium. And to the right of the Blue Moons.
Yeah, we were talking about this in pre-production. This is La Fin du Monde, the end of the world.
So these are some great beers. Also Belgian-style beers, but these are actually made in Canada, outside of Montreal in a town called Chambly. I've been to this brewery as well.
Okay.
And tasted all the products, and they make amazing beers, also very catchy, nice labels. They seem to have a bit of an obsession with devils and the end of the world, and you can see the Maudite has these people coming on the canoe, descending down into hell with the devil waiting for them, and it's a devil's red ale. Also high alcohol.
Those Belgians like to really push the comedy envelope.
Absolutely. Although these are French Canadians,
right? But I guess that's the Belgian style, where because we had pink elephants over there, and now we have like the descendant into Hades.
Yeah, definitely. These are very unique products, but actually very, very well made beers, great beers. You can see 9%, 8.5%, so also very strong product.
And I noticed that they have sort of the cork and the wire cage, so this also must have the extra live action.
Correct.
Yes.
Very, very lively beers. And right away, if you open one of these types of beers and pop the cork, and it's a little thud, then it's probably past its prime or had a problem with shipping or got warm, because when you open these beers, if they're really fresh and ready to go, it's going to be a really active, almost explosive opening.
What is the story in the shelf life of some of these things?
So, if you look at the backs of these beers, some of them will tell you that they're good, for sometimes 2-3 years, especially some of these Belgians. And here, this Canadian Belgian style is basically having a shelf life. It says till 2013. If you go back and look at some,
but it's 2011 for this radio broadcast.
And look at some of the Chimay. I mean, some of them will tell you that it's good for 5 years. Sometimes they say they can be cellared for 10 years. That, though, is imperative that the beers are kept properly, meaning that they're not heating up and cooling down and heating up. So, part of that also implies that you're taking proper care of the product. We'll just touch to give a little shout out to another domestic product that's jumping in on the Belgian thing, which is a brewery up in upstate New York in Cooperstown.
Near the Baseball Hall of Fame.
Right in their backyard. In fact, and I have to say, amazing. I've been to all the breweries in Belgium that we've talked about. I haven't been to this brewery, and it's on my list because I've heard some people, friends of mine, who've went up and did a very nice summer tour coupling the Hall of Fame with a stop at the brewery over a weekend. They say it's a fantastic time.
So for all those people looking for something to do in New York State this summer, it's a great idea.
Yes, absolutely. And Brewery Omegang it basically is a partnership with a Belgian brewery called Duvel, which is probably
which is over here.
A few beers to the left, which is a very, very classic Belgian ale is the Duvel. And basically they got together, the folks from Duvel over in Belgium, and they decided that they wanted to get into the American marketplace, but brew something here on American soil. And what supposedly is happening up there is that it's all Duvel ingredients. So they send over from Belgium the hops and the malt and the yeast. And the key with the Belgian beers that they feel makes it so unique, or at least the Belgian breweries will tell you, is their strains of yeast, because they're using strains of yeast that are hundreds and hundreds of years old that can't be replicated. It's almost like the French saying that the reason their wine is so much better than everyone else's is because the vines are so old,
right,
and simply the vines in the States are not as old. Well, the Belgians are similar about their yeast strains, but in the case of Omegang, Duvel has shared their actual strains of yeast. So some people feel, or at least the people from Omegang would like you to believe, that this is probably the most authentic Belgian-style beer made in the United States, because it's using not only the Belgian products, but the folks from Duvel came over and I think helped them construct and design the brewery and then taught them in the process. So it's really as close to a Belgian-style beer that's brewed in the U.S.
It's fascinating stuff. You really have some great knowledge. Anything else that we should be looking at?
Let's take, as we go a little walk down the aisle, we see a lot of nice local stuff. We're here on Long Island, so I know the guys at Blue Point out in, I believe, Patchogue would at least like some recognition, because they're doing some nice things, and a lot of people enjoy their beers. Toasted Lager is their big summer beer that everyone loves. I happen to be a big fan of Long Trail, which is up from Vermont, and they make a also very, very nice assortment of seasonals, which are very, very good, nice colorful labels. Harpoon up from Boston, also a nice product. Hoegaarden, we'll just touch on everything here. Fantastic summer Belgian ale, also a nice Hefeweizen, and you can see by the picture on the label, cloudy color. It's unfiltered, so it kind of retains that cloudiness to it as opposed to the clarity.
In terms of drinking and taste, what is the difference between a filtered beer and an unfiltered beer?
So, unfiltered ales, first of all, you don't see them as much because they don't have the shelf life, because unfiltered products tend to be not pasteurized, and that's part of the process. So you don't see too many of them around. The shelf life is shorter, but the unfiltered beers tend to have that kind of more fresh, almost like a homebrew type of flavor to them, which some people really like. Some people don't care for them because they tend to be cloudy. They sometimes have some sediment on the bottom, which tends to freak some people out, but it doesn't mean they're a bad beer.
Okay. You're listening to 88.1 FM. Oh, there's Anchor Steam. Here we go.
Yeah, an Anchor Steam, and actually he has all three Anchor products, which is nice. So the Anchor Steam, the Anchor Porter, and then the Anchor Liberty. And the Anchor Liberty is their IPA style, nice hop character, and the Porter is their darker beer, which is a fantastic, also great beer. Once in a while in the winter, you'll see Anchor brews a beer called Foghorn, which is kind of their equivalent of the Sierra Nevada Bigfoot, which is a Foghorn barley wine style ale, very high alcohol, very small bottles because you can't drink too much of it in one time.
Okay.
But good beer. And here's that Weinstefaner, which is the German beer we were talking about, which actually I think believes that they claim that they are the oldest brewery.
World's oldest brewery.
There you go,
so there you go.
And it's a brewery from 1040.
Wow, 1040.
If that is even possible.
That goes back. I bet you the records that they have are pretty interesting to look at. If it really does go back to 1040, they're probably on tablets.
Absolutely, but great product. Also, Hefeweizen style beer, so all wheat products. So very, very good beers. Sammy Klaus, actually interesting.
Oh, I've had Sammy Klaus. In fact, you know what? I love this beer. In fact, Sammy Klaus Dark is an incredible beer.
So, yeah, Sammy Klaus, their claim to fame is that they say that they are the strongest beer brewed in the world. This subsequently, I believe, is not true, because I think in the last 6 months or year I read some beers coming out of Scotland that we couldn't get over here because of the alcohol content, but Sammy Klaus is a 14%. So now you're looking at a beer. It's an Austrian beer that really is in the realm of a bottle of wine in terms of its alcohol content. Very strong beer.
It says that it's malt liquor. Now, what's the difference between a beer and a malt liquor? Is it just the alcohol content?
I believe that's just a labeling requirement in terms
by the government.
By the government, in order to have a product that's 14%, it can't say beer. It has to be labeled as a malt liquor.
Okay. Now, I noticed that there's some, actually, I know these are, whenever you go to the Indian restaurants, there's like Kingfisher and Taj Mahal. I've had those, and big shout out to my friend Tim out there from Colorado who introduced me to all those beers.
I hate to burst one bubble, but the Kingfisher, and we'll confirm this, the last I checked, was no longer being brewed in India, but was being brewed in upstate New York at a contract brewery, and brewed and bottled by Kingfisher, Saratoga Springs.
There you go. Yeah.
I hate to demystify the Kingfisher, but it's not coming from Mumbai.
Okay, well, that's all right.
But actually a nice light lager beer, and it goes well with spicy Indian food because it's a very light character, so washes it down well.
It's very interesting how you need to pair food with different beers. You talked before about sort of the Belgian fruit beers.
Yes.
You know, the Lambecs, having like the raspberry beer with like raspberry sorbet. What would you say is like great with like sort of like, you know, summer food? What's good with like winter food?
Yeah, so you know, the bottom line with beer, first of all, it's all about the personal preference and personal taste. Meaning that just because I like to drink a dark beer in the winter and a light beer in the summer, you might like.
I like dark beer all year long.
You know, exactly the opposite. So in general, you know, these are recommendations, but at the end of the day, it's what you prefer and what you like. But most people feel like in the summertime, you know, they're going to take a nice, cold, lighter product. We talked about the Hoegaarden, which is a very nice summer beer.
It's a very interesting name.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sure Howard Stern could have a lot of fun with a name like that.
I think it actually technically should be pronounced Hoegaarden. And then, of course, there's a lot of seasonal and a lot of domestic seasonal beers that are made, you know, and as we know, Sam Adams makes the summer. Pretty much every American brewery will make a summer ale, and the summer ales tend to be lighter. Sometimes they have some citrus elements in them. Different things, you know, the winter beers tend to be darker. Sometimes they have some spices in them. You know, some people feel like they prefer stouts in the winter, but the truth is it really comes down to personal preference as to what you like.
I see we have an organic beer. Do you see organics coming online? And, you know,
the organic beer marketplace is like with every other food product. You know, it's a niche product. I don't think that, you know, in a year or 2 years or 5 years, you know, the majority of the beers on the shelf, are they going to be organic? I would say the answer is no. But
at one time, I guess those guys from the 1040, those guys,
right.
They must have been organic.
I would imagine so. And so, you know, organic, whether it's some of the hops being organically grown, but I don't think it's anything much more than a niche. But, you know, there's still some good products out there that happen to be certified organic. I think one of them is over here is Wolliver's from, I believe, Vermont.
Well, that would make sense because Vermont's kind of like a leader in like organic products.
Absolutely. So Wolliver's, which is a Vermont product, makes all organic beers. Very, very nice beers and some interesting beers here. I haven't actually even seen or drank this one, and I've tried.
It's a coffee porter.
But yeah, coffee porter. So it's got that darker, you know, nice flavor to it.
It says organic shade-grown coffee from the Alta Gracia community of farmers.
Alta Gracia, we'll see. And it says it also has some vanilla beans in it, so it looks like a pretty interesting product. There's actually, while we're on this other rack, there's some nice beers here. Two different breweries we're looking at here. One of them is Stone Brewery, which is out in California, in San Diego, Southern Cal. Stone brews very interesting beers, also higher alcohol, a lot of flavor, a lot of hops. And if you happen to have a chance to see some of the Stone products, if you read the backs, they're very interesting. They're basically saying this is not a beer for beer wusses, and if you're going to drink this thing, don't call us and complain that it was too strong for you, because that's what we're trying to do.
Well, at least they're up front.
So,
let's see, what's their philosophy? This should not be. Wait, let me see something. This is kind of interesting. Our philosophy. This should not be much of a mystery to anyone. After all, we hardly keep it a secret that we revel in our love for big character brews. Quite the opposite. In fact, we love to shout about it. See, we simply have too much fun creating our brews by traditional artisanal methods to even think about brewing anything that's less than outstanding. And why shouldn't we? There's plenty of brews out there that cover the other end of the spectrum. That's funny. Quite well, so we don't even try to go for mass appeal. If you like big flavor, you'll be happy for our philosophy. Cheers. And it's stonebrew.com.
And
So
this is pretty funny. So I was looking for this one when we started. The Stone, this is their most well-known beer that really put them on the map. And if you look at the name,
well, we can probably say this. This is probably FCC compliant. It's Arrogant Bastard Ale. That's a title. I'm not calling anybody that. It's not an opinion.
Of the beer.
And their motto is "You're not worthy."
And again, if you happen to read some of their backs, they're all very, very, very funny.
This is an aggressive beer. You probably won't like it. That's pretty funny. You probably won't like it. It is quite doubtful that you have the taste or sophistication to be able to suggest that an ale of this quality and depth. We would suggest that you stick to safer, more familiar territory. Maybe something with a multi-million-dollar ad campaign aimed at convincing you that's made in a local brewery, or one that implies that their tasteless, fizzy yellow beer will give you more sex appeal. Perhaps you think multi-million-dollar ad campaigns made a beer taste better. Perhaps you're mouthing your words as you read this. This is pretty funny.
Yes.
And by the way, it's arrogantbastard.com. That's kind of funny.
Very, very funny beers.
That is hilarious.
And what else does he have? This is a nice brewery up in actually by Lake Placid called Southern Tier, which is
the Southern Tier of New York, where I went to college up in the Southern Tier.
Southern Tier. They make also very, very interesting products, interesting packaging, a lot of different ingredients, very, very good stuff. Funny enough, here in between them is a Hebrew, the chosen beer.
The chosen beer, yes.
And that's also from California.
And that's an India Pale Ale. That's interesting.
Yeah, and their initial beer, which I don't see here, was called Genesis Ale.
I remember when that came out. I read about that in like one of the Jewish newspapers.
It got a lot of press, but they've actually stuck in there. They've been around, I think, probably almost 10 years at this point, so they've actually done quite well. Here's some funny beers that are actually made in cans.
Right next to the Hebrew is Pork Slap.
Yeah, I don't know if the irony was intended on the by the shop here, but this is also made in the U.S. Actually from New York. I thought it was from the Midwest, but it's from upstate New York, and they brew canned beers, which most people associate with lower quality, but their kind of motto is that they're in cans, but they're actually very, very high quality, very nicely crafted beers. I don't think you'll ever see an IPA farmhouse ale in a can, so I think that's kind of part of their cachet and their
or
appeal.
A stout or a
or a Moo Thunder stout here, as we see, which is pretty funny. So they brew some interesting products as well.
Wow. You're just an incredible wealth of knowledge. Do we have anything else that you'd like to share, or we're good?
I say we take a break, try a couple of beers, and then maybe we'll come back for part 2.
There you go. Hey, drink up. Cheers. See? It's so fun doing the radio, I'll tell you.